ask, is this a task that you perform regularly, right? So how often do you do this? What's the, can you calculate how much time this actually is costing you? How difficult is it to automate? With something like the component script that my coworker wrote, that was so simple to automate, right? Yeah, you have to know some bash. And then you write it. There was nothing particularly complex there. Just a bunch of important decisions that had to be made around enforcing convention. So if something's easy to automate, and that really makes it more likely that you ought to. Does automating it actually improve it, right? Does it enforce higher consistency or higher quality? And also, is the process documented? Because sometimes adding automation to something actually serves as documentation itself, right? Like, I don't have to go check the style guide to figure out if I'm supposed to use function syntax shorthand in my React components, because I just run the new component script, and it uses function syntax shorthand. Return parentheses instead of return :function parentheses. And so that's the neat part about adopting these kinds of tools. They can replace your documentation. I no longer need to consult the style guide that's on our wiki because I just installed the ESLint plugin to Sublime. Given the option, people only turn to the documentation if they need it, right? Unless they're like just starting a project. So it's really awesome if you can offload those brain cycles and say, nope, you don't have to think about what the correct behavior is. I'm just going to implicitly build it into the way that we do work. And then, of course, there's the issue of actually convincing people to adopt something new. Sometimes it's appropriate to make adoption of a new tool mandatory. For something like a build process, there's no way around that, right? Everyone needs to build their code the same way. For something like a linter, you can decide whether or not you think that you need to make that mandatory. Do you build that into your deploy process? Do you cancel builds if something throws lint warnings? Hopefully not. Do you force people to write tests? Well, that depends on what your organization's attitude towards testing is, right? And what you think that your timeline looks like in terms of how quickly do you have to produce new code. But either way, regardless of if you're forcing people to use a tool or not, if it's not useful to them, the tool will die, right? If you try to include a piece of software in your team's lives and it doesn't add value to them in a very real and tangible way, they're just not going to use it. And that's not a bad thing either. Oftentimes, that just means that what you're doing is you're figuring out that, nope, they have a very much a clear idea of what they actually need. Or maybe it means that that used to be useful, and it was useful, but your team has sort of outgrown the stage where that's something that they need in their developer experience. And then convincing your team to actually do this of their own initiative, right? Because you probably don't want to be the only one who's going around and playing with shiny new things. You want other people to also bring shiny new things to the table. It's really a cultural thing, right? It's about how your team approaches developer experience. I keep using developer experience because it's a term that the React team was really pushing at React Europe. I think it's an important term. I think that the developer experience changes the way that we write code, right? But so, a couple of things. Giving people time to solve their problems and encouraging and rewarding people in a systematic way for solving their problems and the team's problems means that people are more likely to try it. Thank the people who make your life as a developer better, right? It's a very simple thing, but changes people's motivations. And if there's pain points that are causing your developers significant headaches, for example, our old build process, which was, we were wasting 20 seconds waiting for a page to load every time we wanted to test a change, actually build in the buy-in and budget time to fix things. So, you can actually do that. Taking these kinds of things seriously. Just because you're not shipping products doesn't mean you're not writing important software, even if you're on a team that is primarily shipping product. And then try new things, right? React is very, very new. The JavaScript community in general has undergone a lot of churn. It's kind of like a joke, right? When's the new framework coming out? But also with regards to supporting software and things that relate to our developer experience, there's new stuff coming out all the time. That's not a bad thing. That's a really exciting thing. It means that there's probably going to be something that people are excited about that's probably worth checking out. If not immediately, then in a few months, right? So actually making sure that people are encouraged to try out the new thing and figure out if it's a good fit for you and for your team makes a lot of sense. So the TLDR, React is really great. Codecademy has really enjoyed using it. It also makes some things a little more complicated, right? Using JSX and ES6 and using this particular framework means that we have to adjust our development practices to fit that. So you can add in more software tools to make it work better for you and for your developer experience. And the basic principles around this are completely not framework specific. There's nothing that has to do specifically with React that teaches us, like, how do we select which tools our team uses. These are things that should apply across the stack, and with whatever framework gets the most hype next, right? So that's what I've got for you today. Thanks you all for coming out. Any questions? No? Cool. Oh, wait. Sure. So the whole company is pretty small. The company as a whole is 23-ish employees, and I think we've got 8 engineers right now. So it's like literally flat in the sense that you know, we all generally know what we're working on at any given time, but we're definitely given plenty of leeway and encouragement to go off and try things out on our own. And then when we do find something that we think is worth sharing, we share it with the team. So oftentimes that takes the form of someone thinks that Webpack might be a really good idea, right? So they'll go off, they'll spend like one day just quietly working on it. They'll figure out and researching and talking to people on Twitter or an IRC or whatever. And then they'll say, hey, this is something that I think is worth doing. And then they basically just make the case to the team very informally, like, this is important, it's going to solve these problems, I'm going to go try it. And depending on the size of the commitment, either they'll just do it or they'll, you know, rearrange their work so that they can spend a dedicated week on it. The way communication works for that is very unstructured for us. It's often just like a series of conversations in Slack followed by an email follow-up. Sometimes it's a conversation that just happens in our weekly engineering meeting, like all of us sitting around a table. We're still lucky because we're at a size such that it's very easy to manage that. And because our engineers, we're all pretty involved in the product process, so we all have a good idea of like what our prioritization functions should be, right? Like, we have a release that's important for this reason, therefore I'm going to punt. Yeah, so it's something that I think we've been lucky because it's just evolved very organically and has worked well for us. So. Anyone else? Okay, great. Thanks, everyone.